Tulis.
I would enjoy very much hearing from you about what you think would be the best set of characteristics for an applicant for Chief of Police to replace Chattanooga Chief of Police Fred Fletcher, whose last day will be in July. He'll have been here for 3 years. And the mayor, Andy Burke, seeking to fill the spot in his department, has asked a council group, and not a city council, but a commission, if you will, a collection of 6 individuals to help him go through candidates for this position, this top job, the top cop, the top law enforcer in the city. Now, in the background of this whole story, there's one that's not mentioned in any press platform in town except mine, and that is the line of inquiry by a so-called crank candidate, a perennial candidate, Basil Marceau. He is effectively creating a legal challenge, or grounds for a legal challenge, to policing entirely in the state, and that is on account of the $50 fine rule that we have mentioned in several contexts. Most recently, the $50 fine rule cited 2 Tuesdays ago in the city council as a barrier to harassing fines and punishment for people who, in the proposed Airbnb short-term vacation rental district, do not cooperate. And the city officials, Donna Williams, for example, who's part of the Economic Development Office from Mayor Burke, talking about surveillance and harassment of the people so that the city can enforce its will. The will is limited in its force, however, because of the $50 fine rule. And Marceau has been citing that in pointing out that cities are civil only. They don't have punitive powers. They cannot punish as the state can, and they don't have authority, he says, to enforce state law. So this is something that is simmering in the background. Just keep your eye on it. Keep your eye here at Nooganomics.com, my platform and our chief sponsor, and also on the David Tulis program, because this is an issue that, while it emanates from a man who is seen as somewhat wacky and maybe a little odd, and some would say he's certainly a crank buffoon, Basil Marceau has seen some remarkable things in important court cases that deal with this question. So the search committee for the mayor is to find the head, propose the head, nominate 3 men or women whom it views as the best candidate. 800-8949, 800-8949. What is the qualification that would be best? We have looked at some of these characteristics, and the ones I would propose are in line with our argument here at the David Tulis program at Nooga Radio. We are indeed Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and FM 92.7, and also we're on high definition channels, multiple high definition channels for your convenience at 95.3 HD4, for example. And I'm brought to you by Clay Whitaker, one of the best attorneys in town, and we argue that you should love your neighbor and buy local. The search committee, according to Emmett Gienap, who is the crime and course reporter at the Times Free Press, this morning indicates that, the story indicates that the panel has requested a clarification, and the process will now allow people to apply who do not have a college degree but have an equivalent experience. Because after all, there is such thing as equivalency. College, university studies give you so much, but they really have a very limited value. They are overrated. They're hugely overrated, and the university sector is a racket. It is a kind of money laundering racket serving the banking sector and government, marketing government, of course, as it goes, and enslaving a whole generation of young people who won't be able to write off their college university debt. Even in retirement, under getting Social Security benefits, they'll have that benefit garnished because they have not made their payments, and it can't be bankrupted. The search is discussed every week, Emmett indicates, in a meeting between the mayor and Chief Fred Fletcher. And efforts to reach members of the committee have been fruitless. Emmett has tried. I, here, your host, David Tulis, have tried to reach members of this panel. They include Chris Ramsey, who's the Tech Town CEO, and General Sessions Court Judge Christy Sell, and also Bill Cox. I just can't find where Bill Cox is. Does anybody know how to reach Bill Cox? If you do, why don't you email me his phone number? Go to Nooganomics.com and just drop me an email. I've asked a couple of people if they could give me his number. I just can't find it. And then there's also an artist named Olga Decline. She's a former activist in a neighborhood association in Highland Park. And then Bill Killian. And Bill Killian was reached by Emmett and declined to comment. He said effectively in an inquiry regarding this proposed change in the qualification description, he said, I think actually the search committee has decided to speak as a whole committee rather than as individual members granting interviews. We talked about that at our meeting because our effort is a joint one, and we're going to speak as a joint committee. Now, my interest is for you to know who these people are and to make a suggestion. Now, you have every business making suggestions to them, and what I have been suggesting is that they all read an very important report by a writer named Chuck Wexler. He represents the public. Let's see, no, it's the Police Executive Research Forum. All right, PERF, Police Executive Research Forum, and he points out that there are 4 reforms that are crucial to save American lives and to end the police bloodbath. We are slain. We Americans are more destroyed, slain, and executed by police officers than we are anywhere near the number by terrorism. Terrorism is not really a problem in this country, and yet the police departments and sheriff's departments around the country, of which there are thousands, are responsible for many, many deaths. And we are concerned about local economy here in Chattanooga and Helena County. And so our goal is to reform ideas brought to mind, right? If they're not going to be considered by Mayor Andy Burke, who could with them play to his base, then we need to encourage people who have some influence over the selection of the new chief to have the right ideas. They need to have the best ideas, not just ideas. Everybody has ideas on what a qualification should be. Maybe you do, and it's 800-8949, 800-8949. The open economy, voluntary economy, local economy perspective that you have, my listener, and you have it whether you know it or not, okay? Let me just say here that you have this perspective already. You just didn't realize it. And that's what I'm doing here every morning at the David Tulis program at 800-8949. What I'm doing is explaining to you what you already understand and what you already know. I'm just putting words to these sensations and these perspectives that you have. But the problem that you have is that you're listening to the media as you should be. I mean, you should be consuming media, national media. And what happens there is that there's a kind of quiet anesthesia that goes on to articulating what you really think. And so you may be a conservative, you may be a Trumpian, you may be a Republican, right? You could be even a libertarian. But what we have happen is that we fail to connect these right ideas, many of them are very right, with the operation of government and the free market here, right? We can talk about free markets in general. We can talk about honoring the Constitution in Washington, right? We can even complain about obedience to the Constitution in Nashville, but somehow we forget that all those things have to be done right here in your hometown, in Chattanooga, in Ottawa, Red Bank, in Saudi Daisy, in the old what was used to be called Tiftonia, right? On the south side in St. Elmo, and on Lookout Mountain, Signal Mountain, on Elder Mountain, even among the lofty and the wealthy there. These ideas are to be lived out. And what I'm trying to do is inform you how that happens, okay? And so what we do here on the David Tulis program is to look through the news and to deliver the news analysis as we do. And I have some important analysis to offer you today. I hope you can give me just a few minutes. And we'll look in the Wexler paper. There's a report on a graphic on training hours spent. Okay, on use of force topics. Okay, use of force, that is to say, 9mm, 40 caliber, 45 caliber, 223 caliber, and even 50 caliber. The police department, well, the sheriff's department at least, has a 50 caliber, very powerful Barrett rifle. Firearms, it's 58 hours. Now, defensive tactics, 49 hours. Constitutional law, legal issues, 40 hours. You have more time, you have double the time given to shooting and defending than you do to constitutional law or legal issues. Going down the list, basic first aid gets 16 hours. Communication skills, when to use the command and barking voice, when to speak quietly, how to get people to elicit confessions to give you probable cause. All that's called communication skills, right? How to speak respectfully to people, how not to call black people buddy and call the white guy like me with the bow tie sir. Okay, to know that you can't do that. You can't call a young black man pal or you. Okay, you have to call him by, you have to say sir if you don't know his name, and you have to speak respectful. So that's communication skills. Use of force policy, well, 8 hours, that is to say 1 day of lectures goes into the use of force policy. Now here we have the next one on down as the hours get shorter and shorter, as the time devoted in the academy gets shorter and shorter to training the young officer in Chattanooga. De-escalation gets 8 hours, and that's it. 8 hours and 58 hours to muzzle flashes and taking cover and having a gunfight, right? The exciting part of police work, that some officers go their whole careers and never get the excitement of a gun battle, but some get to have it. And this is what many of these former military people live for, which is recreating the war scene in Iraq, or maybe in Afghanistan. It's very exciting, and they live to serve, right? They live to serve on this point. This is why policing is such a mix between total drudgery and tedium and boredom for hours on end, days on end, with routine traffic stops and paperwork and standing around during Riverbend Festival. And so there's that contrast between that and the great eruption of gunfire, bullets zipping through the leaves of the trees overhead as you're lying on your belly at your carbine. Well, 8 hours given to de-escalation, and there, right, and then also 8 hours in crisis intervention, and 8 hours on baton, and so on, and six hours on the use of CS spray or OC spray, as it's mentioned here. There's the two that matter in reform are de-escalation and crisis intervention. 25% of people who end up being killed, if I'm remembering correctly, have some kind of mental problem, right? They're not stable, they're not responding, they're not really rational, they're not acting in terms of self-preservation, and so they end up getting killed. The woman wielding nail clippers shot down in her summer dress because she lunged at the officer. I mean, come on. Why do things like that happen? We've seen over and over again these encounters on YouTube. And if you haven't, well, you, my listener, you need to start paying attention. And then I think you'll see why we need to have reform and why these people on the committee need to hear from you. And they need to have a copy of this paper and from the Police Executive Research Forum. Very important. And there are four points of reform. And what they do is they remove the kill zone around the officer. They prevent the lines in the sand thinking in which Officer Stevenson over in East Ridge gunned down the plumber in cold blood, shooting 5 rounds of a rifle at point blank range at a man who had his hands down by side in his front yard in the public right of way. But the man didn't listen. He was being screamed at by the officer who wouldn't move. The officer would not move back. He intended to stand his ground as a courageous man. And Todd, I think the man's name is Todd. I keep forgetting his last name. Todd crossed 1 foot onto the tarmac, and then the bullets came in. And he got a bullet in the back as he was going down. Officer Stevenson put a bullet in not the front of his body, but either in the back as he went down. And then he just stood there aiming the gun at him for several seconds as if somehow the man might somehow sneak a gunshot at him when all he had was a piece of plumbing maintenance pipe in his hand, the alleged weapon that caused Officer Stevenson to fear for his life. That kind of thing can't happen if you have reform, if you have a reform-minded chief of police. So there are 34 candidates, as we've heard, and more will be invited now that the seeming requirement for a college degree be updated to include equivalent experience. The problem that we have is the whole framework that allows for statutorily permitted extrajudicial summary executions of members of the public. The fact that city employees can execute you, my listener, because you're having a mental episode, stands to me as just the most striking absurdity. And it comes from the legacy of the nation state, right? The nation state is on its way out. And we don't need to fear that. I think that's something that we shouldn't be terrified about. I think we should see in its decline and in its self-abolition under its mountain of debt and its increasing disregard and increasing dislike among common people. We can see there the arrival of reforms in policing, in the whole question, the whole function of public safety, of personal safety. And that's going to be largely, I would say, largely taken on by private parties, and you won't have to have the officer as much. There will still be, of course, officers. There always will be, and that's because we have courts. Courts are lawful. Courts are godly. They have to be there. And if you understand human nature in the fall, we're always going to have the state or the king in some form. There's always going to be over society, hanging over society, what we call today the state. And that is because of the fall and the problem of sin in the hearts of men and women, of man, right, mankind. And that agency is involved in executing the murderer, executing the rapist, and calling to account those who violate the law of equity. And the laws of equity would require fair treatment. It would require honest currency, no false balances, no false weights, which we have now. In fact, false weights as a crime, inequity, and probably and also just a crime against God and against the people. The major crimes today are enacted by the state itself. Private crimes of the kind that the state seems to harass people for are rare and small in scale. The great crimes of our day, almost every one of them, including mass murder, are enacted upon the population, domestic and foreign, by the state. And so what has to happen over time is the diminution of the state, the reduction in scale of it, and the loss of its power and the loss of its authority. That authority is being lost every day in this country. And it's helped in a way by the media, but the media, of course, doesn't have any way of building in the minds of the people a desire for a right authority, a right and proper and limited operation of the modern state. And that's not, the modern state is on its way out, and there are other forms that will be taking place in the future. The United States, Lord willing, is on its way out. And I say that not because I'm not a patriot, because I'm a great patriot. I'm a very patriotic person. However, that is distinct, as Joe Sobran points out in a terrific essay a couple days ago at LouRockwell.com. It is a contrast with the nationalist. The patriot loves his country because it is American. The nationalist loves his country, the United States government, because he believes that it is exceptional, it is tremendous, it is powerful, and it needs to stay that way. He would not love his country if it were number 5 or number 9, down there with Brazil and Portugal. No, the United States, to the nationalist, has to be number 1. It is a very militant and belligerent position to have, and it accepts mass executions, mass bombings of innocent people. It's happening right now. Our American soldiers are killing in Aleppo in bombings hundreds and hundreds of innocent civilians. They're just caught in the way. We try not to destroy innocent people, the field officials say when they trot themselves out in front of the lapdog press in Mideast military encampments. We try not to injure civilian lives, but that happens sometimes. This is war. And so we excuse ourselves for killing common people. And we lose 1 or 2 here and there, perhaps, from a straight terrorist who has an Islamic, who's offended for the cause of Islam. Well, this is David Tulis. We've got a lot to get to today. And I do thank you for giving me a minute of your time, brought to you by Clay Whitaker, the attorney at McCoon Law in Chattanooga. We argue for loving your neighbor and buying local. We've got just so much to get to. And we've got what is the rule about traffic stops in Chattanooga? I have a trove of data from Fred Fletcher. He has given me his whole portfolio of documents of his policies operating the police department. And I'm working on an important story, and that is the use of unmarked cars. But there are many side pockets to that story. And I want to put my hand into a side pocket in the next minute or two and pull out a few baubles, okay, a few choice gems from the motor vehicle stops policy manual. But first, I've got some important messages. Remember, radio is prospers when you support our advertisers. To wit,
the Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader, Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.